NIH data management and sharing policy with ICPSR's NIH-funded projects, DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP, which is brought to you as part of Love Data Week 2023. Next slide. I want to start by outlining what we have planned for today's webinar. We will begin with an overview of DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP, which again are the 3 NIH-funded projects at ICPSR. Next, we will review the services that these projects provide, as well as how you can use ICPSR to meet the data sharing requirements of your NIH grant. We will then cover the types of data that are a good fit for ICPSR's NIH-funded projects, review the ways that ICPSR protects sensitive or restricted data, and give you reasons why we think you should consider sharing your data with DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP. Finally, we'll leave some time at the end to address any questions. Next slide. Here are your presenters for today. Starting with me, I'm Sarah Rush, as Catherine mentioned, and I'm the Data Project Manager for Data Sharing for Demographic Research, or DSDR. I'm joined by Catherine Lavender, the Data Project Manager for the National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging, or NACDA, and Chelsea Sampo-Steele, who is the Data Project Manager for the National Addiction and HIV Data Archive Program, or NAHDAP. Next slide. Before we tell you about our respective projects, I want to highlight some characteristics of ICPSR, or the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. ICPSR is an international consortium of more than 750 academic institutions and research organizations. ICPSR provides training and leadership in data access, curation, and methods of analysis for the social science research community. The data archive consists of more than 250,000 files of research in social and behavioral sciences, and this number is constantly growing. And ICPSR is a unit within the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan, which is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. ICPSR hosts 21 specialized collections of data in aging, education, criminal justice, substance abuse, terrorism, and more. DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP are 3 of these specialized collections, which are funded by NIH. While ICPSR hosts multiple federally or otherwise funded projects, the ICPSR funded or member funded archive that you will hear us mention today is also known as the ICPSR General Archive or the Members Archive. A high-level overview of ICPSR services across all projects within ICPSR includes data archiving and long-term preservation, data curation, metadata standardization, and persistent identifiers, or DOIs, for data collections, appropriate handling of sensitive data, and options for restricted data management and access, consulting services for researchers, including guidance on data preparation, data management and sharing plans, consent language, budgeting, letters of support, and other services as requested. We provide usage statistics for data depositors, and these are provided on all study homepages. And we also provide education and training opportunities for researchers, which relates to general data use as well as training for specific data sets. So next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project I work on, which is DSDR, or Data Sharing for Demographic Research. DSDR hosts a catalog of research data that are available through the DSDR archive, other projects at ICPSR, and repositories outside of ICPSR. This catalog allows for discovery, access, and analysis of data for population studies. Due to our funding by the Eunice Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, or NICHD, our data have a focus on maternal and child health, the life course, and international comparisons. We currently have over 3,900 data sets available, over 1 million searchable variables, and over 41,000 data-related publications, all of which can be found on dsdr.icpsr.umich.edu. Catherine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Lavender, as Sarah mentioned, the project manager for the Aging Archive within ICPSR. Our full acronym is the National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging, but I like to just say we're the Aging Archive. We're funded by the National Institute on Aging. We began as a research concept in around 1978, and were supported by the Administration on Aging, and then officially became funded by NIA in around 1984. In the 90s, we had around 28 public use data sets, and now we have more than 13,000 data sets available. And we offer access to and sharing of data on aging, if that wasn't clear already. And we have curated and self-published options available. And with that all in mind, we promote gerontological research and data on the Aging Life course. And we host a collectible portal for select longitudinal data. And if you haven't noticed, we have a webinar for that tomorrow. So check the Love Data Week events page and sign up. You can find out more by going to our site, which is NACDA-aging.org.
Thank you, Catherine. And hello, everyone. My name is Chelsea Sample-Steele, and I'm a data project manager for NAHDAP, which stands for the National Addiction and HIV Data Archive Program. NAHDAP has been funded by a contract with the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, since fall 2009, and we archive data related to drug and alcohol use, tobacco use, and HIV topics. Many of our most well-known data collections also focus on youth environments, attitudes, and behaviors, and developmental outcomes. Of the studies that you'll find on the NAHDAP website, the most common subject terms that are tagged are drug use, demographic characteristics, tobacco use, alcohol, and youths. The NAHDAP collection includes NIDA-funded studies, but also studies funded by other organizations and institutes. Studies including substance use components of all varieties, studies on HIV-related topics, epidemiological and observational studies, studies including biomarker data, and studies focused on prevention, as well as data from all across the lifespan. We accept a wide range of data of multiple types, including quantitative, qualitative, geospatial, video, image, etc., and some biomarker data, as I mentioned. So we have a very broad catalog of data available on our site and a wide range of data that we accept. And as of a couple days ago, as you'll see in this screenshot here, we had over 500, almost 600 studies available on the NAHDAP website, a study being a collection of data sets, over 1 million variables searchable on the NAHDAP website, and over 27,000 publications.
Thanks, Chelsea. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk a little bit about the new National Institutes of Health Data Management and Sharing Policy and ICPSR services. So we have a new NIH requirement. As of January 25th, NIH requires investigators to submit a data management and sharing plan, also known as DMS. This policy applies to all research funded or conducted in whole or part by NIH that results in the generation of scientific data. This policy does not apply to research that doesn't generate scientific data, including but not limited to training and fellowships. So the goal is to maximize the appropriate sharing of scientific data. It's the PI's responsibility to ensure that their data are managed and shared, and you should contact ICPSR about your DMS plan. The sooner the better. So now we're going to talk a little bit about desirable characteristics for all data repositories. As part of your data management and sharing plan, you'll need to address 6 elements, which Chelsea is going to go into detail on soon, one of which is naming a repository where you will share your data. You can use this list of desirable characteristics to help you choose, and we'll discuss how ICPSR meets these standards throughout this presentation. The list you see is a source, it's from NIH. The source link is on the slide, which we'll share after they're all ready and we're done with the presentation. And so NIH defines the characteristics that are desirable in data repositories to help investigators select an appropriate repository for their data. Investigators are directed to domain repositories over generalist repositories where applicable. As a domain repository, ICPSR, and by extension, our NIH-funded projects meet all of the desired characteristics listed here, described by NIH, and we also have extensive domain experience managing and sharing human subject data. So you'll see some bolded points we're going to go into on the next slide, but again, we'll touch on all of these in one way or another throughout this presentation. So some selected ways ICPSR meets repository standards: unique persistent identifiers. ICPSR assigns each study a digital object identifier, or DOI, which is part of the recommended data citation, and the DOI resolves to a study homepage. We also have web pages which are maintained for deaccession studies, and an explanation about like what's happening with those data, or that they were a deaccession. Long-term sustainability. We celebrated 60 years of experience last year, and we have core trust seal certification, and we support fair data. We have a full set of data stewardship policies, and that includes a plan to transfer data to a partner organization should anything happen to ICPSR and we close down operations. We have curation and quality assurance, and we provide tools and guidance to researchers depositing data. We have a large team of expert curators to review, organize, and document data with tools and processes. And those curators follow a quality assurance process. We also offer free and easy access. ICPSR provides broad, equitable, and maximally open access to researchers everywhere. NIH investigators depositing data to NIH-funded projects. When you give us data and we provide access, that's free to all researchers. And so data supported by ICPSR is free to all members. And then curation costs might be directly budgeted into an NIH proposal. So you should reach out to us about that. And with that in mind, when you're factoring in financial support, if you budget for data sharing in your NIH proposal, the funds must be spent during the performance period. We just wanted to note a couple key points here. The specifics, you should reach out to us, and we'll provide the ICPSR data support email at the end of the presentation. So when you're thinking about budgeting for sharing data, you want to consider the allowable costs, which are costs associated with curating and preserving data. And ICPSR can provide estimates about the cost of its services with respect to curation. You'll want to factor in local data management costs. And then you also want to note that it's not allowable to include infrastructure, data collection costs, or direct charges for things included in indirect costs in the budget for data sharing. More information about this can be found by visiting the NIH link in this slide, but we've provided a convenient QR code for you to scan in case you want to take a look at that. And I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea, and she's going to go into the specifics.
Hey, in this next section, I'm going to talk more about the data management and sharing plan. As Catherine said, under the new policy, researchers who plan to generate scientific data will be required to prepare a data management and sharing plan to describe how the data will be managed and shared. The recommended length is 2 pages or less, and the plan must address the 6 elements listed here on the right-hand side of the screen. NIH does have an optional DMS plan format page available on their website on the Writing a Data Management and Sharing Plan page, which is actually linked on this slide for you. So you can download that format page and fill that out. ICPSR is also preparing a template of this plan, which will include language about how ICPSR or any one of these topical archives address these 6 plan elements. And so you'll be able to take language from that plan and use it in your own data management and sharing plan. And that template from ICPSR should be available within the next couple of weeks. So the goal of this section of the presentation is, much like that template plan, to provide information about ICPSR within each of these plan elements that will help you prepare your data management and sharing plan if you plan to share with ICPSR or one of these 3 NIH-funded archives that we're talking about today. Please do note that individual NIH institutes or centers may have additional guidance for preparing the data management plan, so it's very important to consult the particular RFA or the institute to which you are applying to see if there is additional guidance available. So let's go ahead to the first one. So this is element 1, data type. The information you'll see in these next several slides on the how to respond column is guidance from the NIH data sharing website on how to how to fill out the plan for each of these elements. It reflects our understanding at ICPSR about what NIH is generally looking for in each of these elements. In general, okay, so for this first one, you will want to respond with the 3 types of information that are listed here. So you're describing the type and amounts of data that will be generated. You're describing what will be shared or not shared given any ethical, legal, or technical limitations. And you're also listing metadata and documentation that will be produced. So the ICPSR information here shows how you may want to respond given this this requirement listed in the left-hand side of the slide. So for example, data types, ICPSR accepts a wide range of data types, including quantitative, qualitative, and others. We have a collection development policy, which you can refer to for more information. And then also, as Catherine mentioned earlier, ICPSR performs standard data curation services, and we are willing to consult with data providers on how to prepare your data for archiving. Regarding what will or will not be shared, ICPSR does manage access to confidential data elements through its restricted data dissemination practices, which we will talk more about later in this presentation. But if you have a concern about confidentiality, just know that there is information from ICPSR that we can help with those types of data and that you can provide in your data management and sharing plan. Next slide. Okay, and the third element here was list metadata and documentation that will be produced. So here on the next part of this slide, we have information about how to respond to that for ICPSR information. Next slide, please, or next part. So there's a bunch of information here about metadata. We do a lot of stuff regarding metadata at ICPSR. So for example, codebooks and other study documentation will be made available on the ICPSR and the NIH-funded project website alongside the data. ICPSR has study level and variable level metadata based on the Data Documentation Initiative metadata schema, or DDI schema, which is a widely used standard that allows for compatibility with other data archive catalogs. And ICPSR also uses controlled vocabulary to ensure consistency across studies as well as across organizations. So these are some ways that ICPSR handles metadata and documentation that you may consider adding information about this to your plan as well. Next slide. Okay, so the next element is related tools, software, and code. In this section, you're asked to describe any tools or software that are required to access or manipulate the data. For the ICPSR information regarding software types, ICPSR releases data in many formats to allow for the greatest possible accessibility of the data. The standard suite of formats that we provide for quantitative data includes SPSS, SAS, Stata, R, ASCII, and delimited formats, and PDF, RTF, or text formats for qualitative data. ICPSR can also publish your code or syntax for merging, linking, or other data manipulations. And so we encourage you to submit code to ICPSR when it would be helpful for secondary users. And we also could link to your code if you store it somewhere else in, for example, GitHub or another place where you're keeping your code. We can link to it alongside your data. Next slide. Element 3 is standards, including describing any applicable standards for organizing and accessing the data and metadata, such as metadata standards and formats. And you may also decide in this section if you are collecting common data elements for your project to describe your plans around that in this section as well. So ICPSR, as I mentioned previously, we follow the Data Documentation Initiative metadata standard. And so that's something that's great to fill into your data management plan. It's a widely used metadata standard that allows for compatibility with other archive catalogs. And I've included a link here on this slide if you want to learn more about that standard and what that actually means. In addition, we also use controlled vocabulary to ensure consistency across studies. Next slide. Okay, and because we mentioned common data elements, I wanted to do a quick detour on some quick guidance on planning to share your common data elements with ICPSR. And we have some recommendations to share. We know many of you may be using common data elements that you're not really sure what that means in terms of how to hand these data over to ICPSR. So first, we recommend that you describe which CDEs are included. This will allow us to include this information in the study level metadata and the variable level metadata to support discovery of your data. When designing your variable labels, we recommend that you include the CDE name as part of the label for each item. This again supports data discovery. So as you may know, ICPSR has a variable level search. And so if others wanted to come search for these common data elements through that process, having that information in the variable label name or variable label would allow them to find that information more easily. And third, we recommend that you list all CDEs in a spreadsheet along with all variable names that correspond to the CDE. Now, not every project will have CDEs, but just wanted to give you that guidance in case that does apply to you. Okay, so plan element 4 is data preservation, access, and associated timelines. In this element, you will need to share details about where you are going to archive your data, how the data will be findable and identifiable, and when the data will be made available and for how long. Please note that NIH expects that the data are shared no later than publication or the end of the award, whichever comes first. So the ICPSR information we wanted to share, the 3 NIH-funded projects that we're describing today are NIH-designated repositories. Researchers that are interested in using the data from our repositories can search for and access them on the ICPSR and NIH-funded project websites, so the DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP websites. Data released by ICPSR also, so regarding findability as well, data released by ICPSR receive a digital object identifier, or DOI, which is a unique persistent identifier to ensure the data are permanently identifiable. And also to enhance data findability, ICPSR creates metadata records, again in DDI format, which includes study level as well as variable level metadata to further enhance findability. Next slide. Okay, and so on that third point, when the data will be made available and for how long, we have ICPSR information here that says ICPSR permanently archives deposited files. So that is our business model, is to permanently archive deposited files and support those data through changing technologies, new media, and data formats. Okay, the 5th element is access, distribution, or reuse considerations. There is a lot of information here about how to respond, including describing informed consent, privacy, or confidentiality protections, or other considerations that may limit the ability to share data. Also to state any plan to communicate this limitation to organizations that will preserve and share scientific data, describe whether and how access to the scientific data will be controlled, and describe how research participants will be notified during the informed consent process that their data will be shared. So in order to address these issues, ICPSR's curation staff conduct a disclosure risk and harm review of all data, the results of which will inform the appropriate restrictions or access mechanism to place upon these data. ICPSR can make data available either in public use files, which would require registration to the ICPSR website, as well as an agreement to ICPSR's terms of use in order to access, as well as restricted use files, which have more controlled access associated with them. For example, a signed restricted data use agreement, as well as other application requirements. And then ICPSR also offers tiers of access to restricted data based on the level of data sensitivity, including a virtual data enclave. There's more information here, but we'll also talk about that later in this presentation. This plan element also includes additional considerations for addressing human subjects protections, which are listed here. And we wanted to point you to ICPSR's guidance on informed consent language, which has a link here on this page. You'll find helpful information here on writing your informed consent related to data sharing in a way that's transparent to study participants. Next slide. Okay, we're reaching the end. The final plan element is Oversight of Data Management and Sharing. And in this element, you will need to describe how compliance with the data management and sharing plan will be monitored and managed, frequency of oversight, and by whom at your institution. So ICPSR's recommendation is to identify an individual on the research team who will be primarily responsible for ensuring appropriate data management and sharing protocols and practices. We most often see the project PI and/or their institution that enter into data sharing agreements hold this responsibility. Some other projects, larger projects, may also have data managers who share that responsibility, and some projects even have data coordinating centers, which do this role as well. So those are some examples of what we have seen in our work in this area. And with that, I will hand it back over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Chelsea. So I'm going to talk a bit about what types of data are a good fit for ICPSR's NIH-funded projects. And I just want to note that sometimes we use the word project and archive interchangeably. And so, you know, if anybody has questions about that, it's a bit of, you know, juggling external and internal language for us. So for our demography archive, DSDR, DSDR acquires research data, study, and variable metadata, scales and researcher syntax related to maternal and child health, health disparities, and the human life cycle, with the following priority areas set by NICHD. Data resulting from support by the NICHD Population Dynamics Branch, or PDB. Data that provide opportunities for researchers working within the scientific scope of NICHD PDB that were supported by sources other than NICHD PDB. And data resulting from support by the NICHD Division of Extramural Research from sources other than the PDB, with an emphasis on behavioral and social science research data. So you can scan the QR code on the side of the screen for more information about depositing data with our demography archive DSDR. For submissions to our aging archive NACDA, we have a couple options. We have a curated and a self-published option. And so for the curated option, our highest data priorities are from research on aging, which is funded by the National Institute on Aging, longitudinal or repeated cross-sectional with at least 2 waves of data collection on the same measurements, data on minorities or underrepresented populations, national, international, and cross-cultural data. And I wanted to note we encourage public use data. We do offer restricted options, but for the curated collections, you know, we just want to make sure we have some public usability for any data set. And then for self-published options, our NACDA OAR, which stands for the Open Aging Repository, researchers could submit data on aging from any funder. And it is public use only because it is self-published and we do not do anything to those collections. We do provide guidance to researchers who want to self-publish, and some of those resources you can find on our site. If you go to nacda-aging.org, you'll see a deposit decision tree and depositor checklists and other data sharing best practices lists that we share. But yeah, so you can use the OAR, which is like Open ICPSR, for replication data and syntax related to secondary analysis. Okay, so for submissions to our NAHDAP archive, we are interested in acquiring data related to addiction and substance abuse, with preference given to data with characteristics that are high priority for NAHDAP. So they have a number of priorities or goals related to the data types that they'd like to ingest, but they're most interested in these areas here, longitudinal or repeated cross-sectional studies, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't consider other study designs. They're also interested in building the data collection on minority or underrepresented populations. Some other things NAHDAP looks for is studies that include information on drug addiction, that also intersect with HIV research, studies that use some form of random selection, intervention studies, social science stimulus, executive function studies, large-scale studies, and studies with information on risky sexual behaviors. So even if you're not sure if your data would fit within NAHDAP's parameters, the team is always happy to discuss the possibility of including your data in NAHDAP. And if it doesn't fit within NAHDAP, they'll work with you to find the right place edit for ICPSR. And I would say that that's true across our collections, DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP. So for data sharing across ICPSR, just in general, some points to note, ICPSR, the ICPSR archive is known as the members archive or the general archive. And they accept any data within the social and behavioral sciences realm. So it's pretty broad. And a lot of times, if a topical archive cannot accept data such as DSDR, NACDA, or NAHDAP, you can deposit your data into the members archive, and the NIH-funded data will be made available at no cost to those and ICPSR membership organizations and others for a small charge. Some information about depositing with ICPSR, just to touch on, that ICPSR and OpenICPSR have some file size limits, 30 gigabytes or 1,000 file folders, and 1,000 file folders. We do have mostly quantitative data, but we do accept other file types, so you should reach out to us with questions about that. And then I already noted that the data will be made available at no cost to ICPSR member organizations. And you can find out more by scanning the QR code on the screen. And yeah, just make sure you contact us. Some other options for sharing are the self-published archive or repository within ICPSR is OpenICPSR. This is great for replication data. And submissions to OpenICPSR are made immediately available. And they also include persistent identifiers or DOIs, just like with our curated collections. We want to note that for OpenICPSR, we don't improve or alter the data set. The data are preserved as is and distributed in the same condition and format submitted by the depositor. So investigators or depositors are entirely responsible for data confidentiality or privacy protection and metadata. The other option we have is Linkage Library, which is more focused on code. It's a space where you can combine data sets and share programming codes when comparing different algorithms. Linkage Library, their goal is to promote transparency and replicability of research. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah now, and she's going to talk about how we protect sensitive or restricted data.
Sarah, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Sorry, I have a button that always gets pushed. I'm going to start over. So thanks, Catherine. I'm going to now cover how ICPSR protects sensitive or restricted data. ICPSR's data holdings contain public and restricted data. The public data generally contain no identifiers and pose a minimal disclosure risk. They are immediately downloadable after agreeing to the terms of use and logging into a free ICPSR My Data account. On the other hand, restricted data generally contain indirect identifiers, which can pose a disclosure risk. In the case of these data, any public-facing documentation files, such as redacted codebooks and user guides, will be immediately downloadable. However, access to the restricted data files requires an application. The application process involves gaining IRB approval or exemption for the proposed research project, signing a restricted data use agreement, having an approved data security plan, and at times there are other requirements for specific studies. Restricted data archived with DSDR, NACDA, and NAHDAP are free to use because the projects are supported by federal funding. At times, though, there can be license fees to access the restricted data within the virtual data enclave, which is one of the mechanisms used to provide access to the restricted data. Based on the disclosure risk and sensitivity of the data, ICPSR will produce both open and controlled access renditions of the data. Access to a restricted rendition of the data requires a data use agreement between the applicant's institution and the University of Michigan. This data use agreement covers protocols for the protection of human subjects, as well as the consequences for any violation of the agreement. The applicant must also have an IRB approval and an approved data security plan before being approved to use the restricted data. In addition to these requirements, once again, some studies have other criteria that must be met for access to the restricted data. ICPSR has several safeguards in place to protect respondent confidentiality, including a data stewardship policy committee, a data privacy and security officer and their team, and a disclosure review board that all work together to set policy and practice in order to keep data safe. In addition, ICPSR's data curators receive training and supervision in disclosure risk review, and ICPSR curators also follow guidelines to ensure data confidentiality is upheld. ICPSR provides tiers of managed access to restricted use data with security requirements and safeguards that increase with each tier. As I mentioned in the last slide, a data use agreement, IRB approval or exemption, and an approved data security plan are all required with each tier of access. The tiers include secure download, which allows researchers to download an encrypted file and work with the data in a secure approved location that is specified in the application. The virtual data enclave, where researchers access the data remotely, and the physical data enclave, which requires travel to the University of Michigan for researchers to work with the data in person. One example of the increasing requirements and safeguards applied to these three tiers relates to the vetting of output. With secure download, researchers are responsible for vetting of output themselves prior to using the output in any presentation or publication. With the virtual data enclave, ICPSR staff review the output and other files prior to allowing the files to be removed from the virtual data enclave environment. And finally, when researchers work with data in the physical data enclave, they must submit output, notes, and any other materials for disclosure review before they leave the physical data enclave.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So I'm going to talk about why you might want to use ICPSR and our NIH-funded projects. Just to kind of start to wrap this up. Why use ICPSR? Well, we've got over 60 years of experience in long-term data preservation and data sharing. We also offer data user support. So people contact us all the time, about finding data, using the data, variables that might be missing, data access, and we're happy to help. Another reason is that ICPSR's metadata is regularly scraped by other organizations, so our discoverability is high across our collections. And the NIH-funded projects within ICPSR are connected with NIH program officers, so we try to be at the front of any priorities that NIH has in mind. If our NIH-funded projects can't work with you, there are other ICPSR options available. And again, it's all discoverable in the same place. We provide utilization reports and actively seek out related publications. So we have a bibliography team that goes through and confirms whether or not publications have used studies listed on our site, and they link them. ICPSR and our federally funded projects have a consistent site design such that researchers can explore all of our data products and services with a smooth transition. So we like to say, if you can use one, you can use all. And we just want to reiterate that ICPSR supports FAIR data, and FAIR means findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. So the ways that we support each of the FAIR principles are the use of our DOIs, use of quality descriptive metadata, and machine accessible metadata. For accessibility, the metadata is available through standard protocols. We have information about access restrictions, which is embedded in the metadata. And then some technical OAI PMH allows external users to access mass harvesting of our metadata for use. So this is related to what I mentioned, how our repositories might scrape our metadata. For interoperability, metadata is in a standard format. Metadata uses controlled vocabularies that are machine accessible, and our metadata contains internal links to related resources. And lastly, for reusability, our metadata uses accepted standards. The metadata and data are available in widely used file formats, and licensed information is included. So I know that that was a lot about FAIR, but just to kind of hit it home that we support FAIR data, and we are, again, certified as a trusted digital repository by the Core Trust Seal, an international nonprofit that promotes sustainable and trustworthy data infrastructures. You might want to go to our site after this presentation to find some resources. And so we captured an image here from the ICPSR homepage. If you go to the Share Data tab, you'll see an option for Share NIH Data, and that's highlighted there. If you go to that page, you will find a lot of helpful links. And we've got a QR code here on the slide. You can scan to go right to it right now if you want. And if you need a curation cost estimate, there's a form you can complete to reach out to us, and we will get back to you within a few business days or so. And yeah, we look forward to everyone's questions. And so now we just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. And I want to thank Sarah and Chelsea for doing an excellent job. And here is our user support email, icpsr-help@umich.edu. If you want to get a hold of any one of us, that's the email to contact. It will get directed to us. And now I think we're going to go through the Q&A and answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. As Catherine said, we're going to open up for questions now, and we've already received some questions both in the chat and the Q&A box. So I'm going to start going through those. The first one is, can you give a sense of a ballpark for curation costs for data sets? Is the cost different for people from member institutions? Chelsea, do you want to take that one?
Yes, great question. So the first thing I'll say is there's no difference in cost if you are or not at a member institution. One thing we are working on, which we will share with participants today when it's ready, we expect it to be ready very soon, is a cost estimate document that will have an expected sort of flat rate type of fee for data that meet certain criteria. And so that will soon be available to you, and it'll be a lot easier to estimate your own budget without getting in touch with us. What I would recommend is that you please reach out to us for a cost estimate via the ICPSR user support email, which is here on this slide. You can include attention to NAHDAP or DSDR or NACDA in your email if you think you know where you want the data to go at ICPSR, and it'll get routed to one of us. There's just so many factors that can affect the cost estimate, including the data types. So it's very hard to just give a ballpark estimate right now. What I will say is that you only need to budget for upfront costs for your project. There are no ongoing fees for long-term maintenance at ICPSR, and you should budget those costs at the years during your project when you expect to be sharing data. So it's not something that you would necessarily need to budget for year after year of your project. Catherine, I saw that you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I just wanted to reiterate that it would be extremely difficult to provide a standard ballpark estimate because every data set is so different. And you might notice that we use words like data set, study, collection, series, and those all mean sort of different things to us. And so sometimes people are thinking about depositing an entire series, which can mean multiple studies. Sometimes a single study might need multiple data sets to someone. Sometimes it might be a single data set to another person. And since there's such a wide range that we accommodate and that's out there in the world that researchers are collecting, that's why we can't provide that just offhand.
Thanks, Catherine. For our next question, do you have software that can produce the DDI codebooks out of a Stata or SAS data set with variable and value labels? Catherine, do you have any insights on this?
Sure. So we do not offer that software from ICPSR. However, if you go to the DDI Alliance site, you can find resources from them. It should just be ddialliance.org, I think, but I can look it up and share it in the chat after I mute myself. But yeah, essentially, we do produce DDI codebook metadata, which you can download from study pages, but that's at the collection level, not the variable level metadata. And I think, so we do produce DDI codebook for every study that is curated, but I think that accessing that, you might have to reach out to us via user support and get special permission. It's not something that we offer available for download. But yeah, if you're interested in creating DDI, I highly recommend the DDI Alliance. They're international membership that supports interest across the research community in DDI.
Thanks, Catherine. Our next question, is it the case that you can only publish data related to these 3 projects, or can researchers at member institutions have a data set from an NIH-funded project and within the discipline scopes accepted for publication? I can take the first shot at answering this. Basically, if a data set or study fits outside of the priority set by any one of our funding agencies, I think there's a good chance that we will not be able to accept it. However, we encourage you to reach out to us still, because at a minimum, we can help you with the ICPSR acquisition process. As Catherine mentioned, ICPSR has a broader scope and can take data that fall outside of the priorities set by NACDA, DSDR, and NAHDAP. Another question, who makes the final decision on data fit for the NIH projects? So I can speak to DSDR in the way that we generally go about this is the DSDR director, John Marcotte, and I generally review the deposit or somebody who is interested and has come to us ahead of time with interest to deposit with DSDR. And often we go back to our NICHD project officer and have a conversation about how this fits within the scope and the different tiers of priority that they've defined. Catherine and Chelsea, do you have anything that varies beyond that for your projects?
I would say the process is very similar. Jim and I would discuss it, and then we would seek out NIA's advice for anything that's not immediately clear to us.
I agree with, for NAHDAP, we would take that information back to our project officer, back to NIDA, and discuss it with them. One thing I will say that I want to make sure is very clear is if your data fit within ICPSR's collection development policy, which was linked elsewhere in this presentation, and we'll send this out again after the presentation, it is, we expect here at ICPSR to accept it somewhere within ICPSR. So if you're not totally sure, you can still put ICPSR or one of our archives in your data management sharing plan. And again, we will work to, we're all very close knit here at ICPSR. So we will work with others in our organization to find the exact right place for it.
Thanks, Chelsea. On a related topic, in the members archive, is there curation services? Yes. The curation services that we covered in this talk basically pertain to all projects, whether it be DSDR, NACDA, NAHDAP, or the General Archive. I know that Open ICPSR does allow researchers to make their data restricted access. Is that not possible for the self-deposit open version of these subject repositories?
So actually, I think that the Aging Archive is the only project here that has an open version of itself. So we have the Aging Archive NACDA, and then we have NACDA OAR, Open Aging Repository. And so yes, ICPSR, Open ICPSR does allow researchers to make their data restricted access. And you're right, that is not possible at this time for the NACDA OAR. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. NACDA is me and my director, James McNally, and then we you know, have ICPSR support and curation staff for a certain amount of effort. And so I guess the best way to say this is that within our resource constraints, all we can offer at this time is an open self-published repository. However, in the future, there might be possibility for restricted self-published options through NACDA OAR, but yeah, thank you for the question.
What if it's an R21 pilot data that might not be high quality and just used to inform a larger R01? I would say,
answer this.
Yeah, go ahead, Chelsea.
So I can answer this from the NIH policy perspective. There is a really excellent FAQ on the NIH website that tells you when data may or may not be appropriate for sharing. So I think that my guidance is assume you're going to share unless you find out from the NIH project officer later that your data don't fall within that category. But there are considerations for pilot data within that FAQ. So I will track that down and I will add a link to that to the chat momentarily when I find it.
Thanks, Chelsea. Okay, there are many free data repository options. What does the deposit cost from ICPSR get you that goes beyond what the free services offer? For example, how can we convince researchers to go with your paid service? So a couple of things I'll note, and then I'll hand it over for anything Chelsea and Catherine want to add. The paid curation is, with these projects that we talked about today, is an option. We encourage you to budget for these costs because I can speak for DSDR. It allows us to hire more curators, which helps us to get your data out the door faster. Payment and fees are not required. The other thing that I wanted to note is that ICPSR's reach is, you know, we're known worldwide. You know, for one reason to go with ICPSR, we're known for providing high quality products and providing service beyond the products, like the trainings we mentioned, and the bibliography that's tied to studies. So that's another perk I would list for ICPSR. Catherine, Chelsea?
So I think it's interesting what people pick up on. I would say that you know, the cost points would definitely flag my attention if I were on the other end of this. But I think that the most important thing you said, Sarah, is that it's not required, it's an option. And so ICPSR and the NIH-funded projects within ICPSR exist to serve the research community. And most of the work that we do results in free access and open access to researchers and the community, to the public. And for the most part, all the services we provide are free or, you know, a very reasonable cost if that's necessary. But for those of you who are like, oh, why would someone pay? Well, you know, say we have a queue and they're all high priority items from each of our funders. Someone might opt to budget for costs and pay in order to be placed a higher priority than other people on that list. And that's like a very basic way I can put it that might not be completely accurate. But like, in a sense, it's as Sarah said, you would raise your priority in us working on it because it's supported. And then that means that we have more basically human effort and other resources that we can devote to doing that.
I would also just add that there are more benefits as well to the person sharing the data when sharing at ICPSR than there may be at other free repositories, for example. So in addition, I mean, as Catherine and Sarah, I think both have explained, like we put a lot of work into making sure the data are findable and accessible. We tag metadata very closely. We have these systems that have been around for a long time on our website and things like that to allow for findability of the data. But in addition, there's the benefits to you as a person who's sharing the data with us, as findability of your data increases, usage of your data increases, attributions to you as the person who have shared those data increase. And I think as we mentioned in an earlier slide in this presentation, provide usage statistics for free to you as a person who has shared your data with us, so you can see what reach your data have, and that's information that you can use on your CV or other things. Also, data sharing is it's a publication of sorts, and so it's something that you can use to bolster your own resume as well.
Thanks, Chelsea. We're getting close to the end of our time, but I think we might be able to squeeze in one more question, because I think the response relates very closely to what Chelsea just shared. And the question is, why would someone deposit in these archives that charge a deposit curation fee rather than put it in the general open ICPSR version that's free? So again, I want to go back to the fee is optional. But reasons to put it in one of these project archives over open ICPSR rather, is that you're going to get the benefit of data enhancements. For open ICPSR, it's self-published, so it does allow you to do it right away. And that's a huge benefit. On the other side, when you deposit with a curated project, like a project that uses curation, I should say, like DSDR, we are going to give it a thorough disclosure review value labels, variable labels for accuracy and thoroughness, and do other things that generally enhance the usability of your data. So Catherine, Chelsea, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you made a great point. And to get into the specifics, metadata is what makes all of our work possible. And we put a lot of work into ensuring that we meet high metadata quality standards. And so one note about a self-published repository is that you do not get variable level metadata discoverability with open repositories, and that includes open ICPSR. We love open ICPSR. It meets a need and makes things available immediately, and you do get those usage statistics. However, you would add your own related publications, and again, the variables are not searchable from the site, whereas they are with the curated archives.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so we are at the end of our time today, and I want to let you know that we will follow up with any questions, I should say responses to any questions that we didn't get to, as well as a link to our slides and the recording as soon as possible with those. And if you have questions after the webinar ends, as Catherine said earlier, we recommend you contacting icpsr-help@umich.edu, and your request will then get routed to the project or ICPSR staff member who can best service you. And with that, I want to say thank you for attending today, and that's it.